Mining Weekly Online is today talking to Becky Moyo about the SAMA and SAT regional dialogue that was held in March. The dialogue focused on the portability of social security for mine workers and found that effective communication was one of the biggest challenges. Welcome, Becky.
Thank you very much.
Becky, tell me, what were some of the findings that were made after these regional dialogues?
Thank you. Let me start by thanking Mining Weekly for highlighting some of the key issues that affect the vulnerable. So this was a follow-up dialogue to one that we held last year, and we were taking progress in terms of what has happened since then. So one of the issues that came out in terms of communication was the lack of a centralized database which would make it easier for all the funds and the claimants to be able to access their data and pay out the benefits. So one of the proposed solutions is that the Financial Services Board would lead in communication with other departments, including the stakeholders, the formation of a centralized database. So I think that's a key one, because once that is done, it will address all issues that have to do with legislation, how you share information, and what to protect and what not to protect. The second issue that is important is that it is still very difficult for relevant stakeholders to trace some of the beneficiaries, including the ex-miners themselves. And so part of what the Trust and the Association of Ex-Miners have been doing is to actually support a project where they recruit tracers on the ground and try and go as far and deeper to the communities to identify them. And I think amplifying that work is something that is going to be very useful going forward. In fact, they reported some progress in terms of how many people they've traced. In Lesotho, more than 12,000 people have been traced. In Mozambique, almost 5,000 people have been traced. And in Swaziland, I think more than 1,000 people have been traced. In South Africa, about 9,000 people have been traced, and of those, about 3,000 have been paid out. And so I think that's a major step for us going forward. I think the third issue around communication was that we need to even make use of other innovative media tools, including going down to the radios, to the social and digital formats, so that at least we can reach as many people as possible. And finally, I think it's the issue of the regional nature of the challenges and harmonization of the different initiatives that are trying to solve the same problem. And the decision there was that maybe we should ask the SADC Secretariat to harmonize this and coordinate the harmonization of the various initiatives. For example, you have an initiative on the TB in the mines. You have the Institution for Migration, IOM. You have the World Bank and others doing almost similar things to what the Trust and SAMA are doing. So I think a harmonization of that going forward will be important.
Now, last year it was found that unpaid claims amassed to 6 billion rand. Has a dent been made in this figure?
We as the Trust are happy with the progress so far, but we still think that a lot should be done. As you said, we estimated about 6 billion that was unpaid in the mining sector, and 3 billion of that was owed by the Mine Workers Provident Fund. They reported at the dialogue that they've paid 15% of that. So that means we're talking at least close to 350 to 400 something million that has been paid. It's still a small amount compared to what they owe, but for us it's a huge progress. We also know that Sentinel has also been paying out. They did not owe much compared to the other funds. But I think the bigger picture is that what the Financial Services Board has reported is that they currently are more than 5,000 funds. Of those funds, 50 are dedicated to unclaimed benefits. And so we are really looking at perhaps a tiny bit of the funds as the Trust. We have just worked with about 3 funds, and we are trying to invite more into the picture. So I think that the work going forward is still huge in terms of those that have not even been engaged. But those that we've been engaging with, we are really seeing some progress in terms of the amounts that have been paid.
Please tell me more about the way forward for SAMA in this regard.
Yeah, so the Southern Africa Association of Mine Workers, SAMA in short, is a group that was established necessarily and primarily to galvanize views, capacity enhancements for the ex-miners themselves. And so it is an aggregation of associations in different countries. The current active members Mimo from Mozambique, the ex-miners group in Lesotho, and one in Swaziland. I know that they've been working hard to establish one here in South Africa in the Eastern Cape, but also in Botswana and Malawi. And so the way forward for them is really to be capacitated in all fronts. One, to be able to manage their own affairs because they are an institution. So we have been working with them to provide capacity enhancement so that they are able to really run their own issues. The second is that they should be able to engage even at the highest policy level, because most of what they are encountering are actually as a result of policy decisions. And so for them, they should be able to represent the state of the ex-miners and infuse voices into the policy making process. And we have seen a bit of that with them now doing that. I think the third thing is to be able to then begin a process where SAMA and its members begin to engage in some of the economic empowerment, I would say, activities. Because as we talked earlier, some of these ex-miners receive a lot of money. How do they use that money once they've received it? I think it's a major decision for SAMA to work with groups like IOM and others to then begin plowing back into livelihoods projects. And so I think that it would be very useful for SAMA to actually have programs that assist the ex-miners on how to manage their funds. The third issue, which is what we've been trying to work with them to infuse, is to look at the gendered nature of this struggle. Most of the people who suffer here are the widows and the children, and we are beginning to engage with the widows. And the team went to Mozambique last year, and the state of the widows was just saddening. And so we are beginning to see that beyond the actual workers and the actual miners themselves, there's need to begin to, first at the level of SAMA's governance, to have women as part of the governance structure, because that way you are able to then engender the programs of SAMA itself. But secondly, to begin maybe thinking about creating a platform of widows that would also be able to speak for themselves, because part of what the trust does is to empower these institutions and these sectors to be able to take issues for themselves. And so we link them with the media houses, media platforms, and some of the policy making institutions. So I think that there's a lot that still needs to be done where SAMA is concerned, but we are very clear that this year, as the year of women's empowerment, we need to focus more on the widows, on the children, and make sure that beyond the challenges of just the ex-miners themselves, the men predominantly, if you look at the claims, about 98% are men and 2% are actually women. But that misses the point, because it's only looking at the member who was working in the mines. It's not looking at the people who are affected afterwards. And so we want to address that. So I think those are some of the issues going forward where ourselves and SAMA will be trying to look at.
Thank you, Becky. That was Becky Moyo from the Southern African Trust.